The ghost of the tundra highway. The cab of my rig was my sanctuary. For 20 years, I've been hauling freight from coast to coast, and the road has been my only constant companion. I've driven through blizzards in the Rockies and dust storms in Texas, but nothing prepared me for the stretch of road they call the Tundra Highway. It's a desolate ribbon of asphalt that cuts through the northernmost parts of Alaska, where the landscape is nothing but endless, frozen wilderness. It was a late-night run. The rain was coming down in sheets, a cold, relentless drumming on the roof of my truck. The road was a slick, black mirror, and my headlights cut two small, frantic tunnels through the overwhelming darkness. The radio was just static, and the only sound was the drone of the engine and the hiss of my tires on the wet pavement. I was exhausted, and every mile felt like 10. That's when I saw her. Just beyond the reach of my high beams, on the shoulder of the road, a lone figure stood in the pouring rain. She was wearing a thin white dress, soaked to the skin, with her thumb outstretched. No coat, no umbrella, no bag. Just a girl in a white dress in the middle of a frozen, desolate nowhere. It was a sight so out of place that it snapped me out of my weary trance. I know the rules. You don't pick up hitchhikers on these lonely stretches, but something about her, the way the rain ran down her face like tears, the haunted look in her eyes, it got to me. I slowed down, pulled the rig over to the shoulder, and opened the passenger door. She climbed in without a word. The air in the cab, already damp from the storm, instantly turned bone-chilling cold. She didn't shiver. She just sat there, her thin dress clinging to her, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. I glanced at her a few times, expecting her to say something, but she was silent. "You're a long way from home, aren't you?" I finally said, trying to break the tension. She turned her head slowly to look at me. Her eyes were an impossible shade of gray, like the mist on a frozen lake. Her lips parted, and her voice, when it came, was a soft, hollow whisper, like a ghost sighing. "This road, it's a lonely one. A lot of people get lost out here." I nodded. "That's why you have to stay on the main path." "Or maybe," she whispered, her eyes still on me, "the main path finds you." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The conversation shifted, becoming more unsettling with every mile. She didn't ask about my life or where I was going. She asked about the road. She spoke of the bends in the highway where people had gone off the cliff. She mentioned the miles where drivers had just vanished. Her knowledge of every tragedy along this empty stretch was unnervingly specific. "They say you can still hear them," she said, her voice a low hum. "The people who never made it. They say they're always right here on the road, waiting to be found." I tried to change the subject, but she just smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a cold, knowing curve of her lips that made my stomach clench. About 100 yards down the road, I saw a distant light. It was the only gas station for hundreds of miles. My fuel was running low, and I needed to stop. "Looks like we're almost there," I said, my voice filled with a relief I couldn't hide. I looked in the rearview mirror, checking the road behind us before I took my foot off the gas. The road was still a black, empty void behind the truck. I looked back at the passenger seat. It was empty. My foot slammed on the brake,
My truck skidded on the wet asphalt, the air brake hissing loudly as I came to a grinding halt. The rain was still drumming, but the sound in the cab was gone. I sat there, my heart pounding in my chest, staring at the empty seat. I knew what I had seen. I had seen her get in. I had heard her voice, but she was gone. I slowly reached over and ran my hand over the seat. It was soaked, and it was freezing cold, as if the Arctic air itself had materialized right beside me. That was the moment I knew it wasn't a hallucination. It was a real, terrifying encounter. I didn't stop at that gas station. I didn't even look back. I just put my foot on the gas and drove. A frantic, sleepless rush through the rest of the night. The road felt different after that. It felt haunted. I never drove the Tundra Highway again, but even now, when I'm on a lonely road in the dead of night, I can still feel the cold from that empty seat, and I know that some things don't stay buried in the past. They just wait, haunting the same places where they once lived, forever, trying to find a way home.
The Highway to Nowhere. Here's my creepy encounter. This one is a personal account, a first-hand experience of when I learned a very valuable lesson. Don't always trust your GPS, because sometimes it's not trying to help you, it's trying to lead you somewhere else entirely. This happened a few years ago. I was on a cross-country road trip, heading from Chicago to Los Angeles to visit an old friend. I was a few hours outside of Vegas, and I was making great time. The sun was getting low, painting the Nevada desert in shades of purple and orange. I was just cruising, windows down, music on, feeling that sense of freedom that only comes from being alone on the open road. But then, my GPS went out. 1 minute it was humming along, giving me directions, and the next, the screen was just a blank, frozen map. I tried restarting it, but nothing, just a blank screen. I figured I'd keep going. I was on a major highway. What could go wrong? A few miles later, a digital sign on the highway flashed, "Detour, Route 93 closed." I had no cell service, so I couldn't verify it. I was a bit annoyed, but what could I do? I followed the signs for the detour. The road was a small, 2-lane highway that cut through the middle of nowhere. I figured it would link back up with the main road soon. But it didn't. The sun went down completely, and the sky became a vast canvas of stars. The road was pitch black, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through an endless, silent desert. My radio station, which had been perfectly clear just moments ago, turned into nothing but static. I tried a few other stations, but it was all the same, nothing but white noise. I started to get a bad feeling. The road was completely empty, not a single car, not a single light from a house or a town, just me and the dark. That's when I started to notice the signs. They weren't official road signs. They were crudely painted wooden placards stuck into the ground by the side of the road. The first one just said, "They watch." I thought it was some kind of spooky art project. A few miles later, I saw another one. It was a simple black drawing of a stick figure with its arms raised, surrounded by a circle of smaller jagged symbols. The next one was a single word, painted in thick, blood-red letters. "Turn back." My blood ran cold. The road behind me was just as dark and empty as the road in front. I was so disoriented that I had no idea which way I had come from. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I was about to turn around, to go back no matter what, when I saw it. About 100 yards ahead, in the middle of the road, was a figure. It was a man, just standing there, with his back to me. He was wearing what looked like a long, dark coat. I slowed to a crawl. As I got closer, I could see that he wasn't moving at all. He was completely still. I decided to honk my horn. The sound shattered the silence, echoing in the vast emptiness. The figure didn't flinch. It didn't turn around. But then, as I got even closer, I realized what was so unsettling about it. It wasn't a man. It wasn't human. It was too tall, too thin. Its arms hung by its sides, unnaturally long, and its legs seemed to bend the wrong way. The head, if you could call it that, was just a small, misshapen lump on top of a long, spindly neck. I was about to slam on the gas and fly past it, when suddenly my engine died. My car coasted to a stop about 10 feet away from the figure. My heart was in my throat. I tried to start the engine, but nothing happened. The key just turned with a lifeless click. The figure, slowly, deliberately, began to turn around. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see what was under that black coat. I was frozen, my hands gripping the steering wheel. And then I heard it. A sound that will forever haunt me. It wasn't a growl, or a roar, or a whisper. It was a series of clicks and pops, a bone-chilling sound that came from a place that could not possibly be alive. And as the figure fully turned to face me, I got a clear look at it in the headlights. It didn't have a face, just a smooth, pale orb with two large, empty black holes where its eyes should have been. And as I stared at it, the holes seemed to get bigger, as if they were swallowing the light. I was so filled with pure, unadulterated terror that my body just shut down. I was paralyzed. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even breathe. And then it started to move toward me, slowly, deliberately, its spindly legs carrying it across the asphalt with a jerky, unnatural motion. I was about to lose my mind. I put my head down on the steering wheel and squeezed my eyes shut, whispering over and over again, "This isn't real. This isn't real." I don't know how long I was like that. It could have been seconds or it could have been hours. When I finally lifted my head, it was morning. The sun was shining. My car was sitting on the side of a busy highway, and the engine was purring. I looked in my rearview mirror. There was no detour, no strange signs, and no strange figure. The road behind me was a well-maintained, official highway. I have no idea what happened that night. All I know is that when I got to my friend's house, my hair had a few gray strands in it, and now I never take a road trip without a full tank of gas and a phone with a full charge. Because sometimes the darkness on the road isn't just an absence of light. It's a presence, and it's waiting for you to get lost.
The haunting children at the rest stop. The rain came down in sheets, a relentless pounding on the roof of my truck cab. The world outside was a blurry gray wash of water and mist, with the highway's white lines disappearing and reappearing in my headlights. For a long-haul trucker, a night like this is pure misery. Every mile felt like a lifetime. I was somewhere in the middle of nowhere, on a desolate stretch of I-75 in Kentucky. My eyes were burning, and the hum of the engine was a low, maddening drone. I knew I needed to stop, but the thought of pulling into an old, isolated rest stop on a night like this was unsettling. These places, meant to be havens for weary travelers, have a way of feeling like a trap once the sun goes down. I finally saw a sign, Maple Creek Rest Area, next exit. I took it, pulling off the highway and into a large, nearly empty parking lot. The rain was coming down so hard that even with my wipers on full blast, it was tough to see. The rest stop building was an old single-story brick structure, dark and uninviting. The only light came from the dim glow of the restrooms and a single flickering street lamp that cast dancing shadows across the asphalt. I parked and killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the furious drumming of the rain. I sat there for a moment, just breathing, before reaching for my jacket and stepping out into the downpour. The cold air hit me hard, and I hurried toward the building, my head down. That's when I saw it. In the far corner of the parking lot, just beyond the glow of the flickering lamp, I saw a figure. It was a tall, dark shadow, moving slowly. It wasn't walking, it was gliding, a smooth, unsettling motion. I froze, my heart thumping. I told myself it was just another trucker, a guy stretching his legs in the rain. But something felt wrong. I watched it for a long, quiet moment, but it didn't seem to have a body, just a vague humanoid outline. As I watched, it simply faded away into the shadows, gone as if it had never been there. The cold, wet air suddenly felt like an icy hand on my neck. I shook it off and hurried inside. The inside of the rest stop was just as lonely as the outside. The floors were slick with rainwater, and the only sound was the whir of the hand dryer and the quiet hum of a soda machine. I was just about to head to the restroom when I heard it. A faint, almost musical sound, like the distant laughter of children. My blood ran cold. I stood there, listening. The laughter was so faint, almost swallowed by the sound of the rain, but it was there. It sounded like two children, a boy and a girl, laughing as they played a game. It was a sweet, innocent sound, but here, in this cold, empty building at 2 a.m, it was the most terrifying thing I had ever heard. I told myself it was just the sound of the wind or maybe the building's old pipes, but deep down I knew it wasn't. I followed the sound, my boots squeaking on the wet floor. It seemed to be coming from the back of the building where the vending machines and a small door to a utility closet were located. I crept closer, the laughter getting louder with every step. I was now certain. The sounds were coming from a small, empty playground in the back. I pushed open the door and stepped out into the pouring rain. The laughter was now clear and distinct, a happy, infectious sound that seemed to mock the sadness of the storm. I shined my phone's flashlight into the darkness, and the beam cut through the rain, illuminating the small playground. There were no children. The swings were swaying back and forth, a slow, mournful motion. The seesaw was still. There were no footprints in the mud, no sign of anyone at all. Then the laughter stopped. A cold, so intense it burned my skin, washed over me. I shined my flashlight to the swings, and I saw them. 2 small, translucent figures, one on each swing, sitting perfectly still. They weren't solid, they were almost like a heat haze in the rain, their forms shimmering. The figure on the far swing slowly turned its head, and I could see the vague outline of a face, eyes like empty black holes. The air around me was so cold it hurt to breathe. A low, sorrowful moan filled with an unbearable sorrow came from the figure. It was a sound that had no place in this world. I dropped my phone and ran. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, scrambling back to my truck, my keys fumbling in my wet hands. I didn't look back. I got in, locked the door, and peeled out of that rest stop, leaving it behind in the dark and the rain. I drove for 2 more hours, my heart hammering in my chest. The image of those 2 children burned into my mind. The next day, I looked up the history of that particular rest stop. A local news article from the 1980s mentioned a tragic accident just a few miles from the exit. A family's car had hydroplaned in a sudden storm, and the 2 youngest children were killed. The story was short, a brief blurb from a long-forgotten paper, but it was enough. I know now that some rest stops aren't just for weary travelers. They're for the lost. They're for the spirits of the heartbroken, forever trapped in a moment of pure, unbearable sorrow. And I'll never again pull off the highway in the middle of a lonely, rainy night.
The Last Stop. Here's a story for you today. This one is a personal account, a first-hand experience that completely changed how I think about late-night drives. It's a story about a place that wasn't on any map and a feeling that something was waiting for me there. This happened a few years ago. I was on a cross-country road trip, heading home from college for the summer. I was a few hours outside of Denver, pushing through a long, dark stretch of rural highway. It was well past midnight, and I was running on fumes, both in my car and in my body. The closest town was still an hour away, and my fuel light had been on for about 15 miles. I was starting to get a little nervous when I saw it. Just off the highway, barely visible, were two pale lights. As I got closer, I realized it was a gas station. Relief washed over me like a wave. It was an old-fashioned place, the kind you see in black and white photos, with a single pump and a small, squat building. The fluorescent sign above the pump flickered erratically, casting long, dancing shadows. I pulled off the main road and onto a gravel driveway. The silence was immediate and complete. The hum of my engine died, and the night became an eerie void of quiet. Even the crickets had gone silent. My headlights illuminated the building. It was in disrepair, with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. The door was ajar, and a dim yellow light spilled out onto the cracked asphalt. I got out of my car, the gravel crunching loudly under my sneakers. The air was thick and smelled of dust and something else. Something metallic and sour. As I went to the pump, I glanced at the building and saw a figure inside. It was the attendant, a tall, gaunt man standing perfectly still behind the counter. He was so still, he looked like a wax figure. His face was pale and unnaturally smooth, and his eyes were just two dark, empty holes. I tried to act normal. I went to the pump and started fueling up. The machine was old and slow, and the numbers on the display ticked up sluggishly. As I waited, I kept looking at the attendant. He hadn't moved. He was just watching me. The feeling of being watched was so intense, it felt like a physical weight on my shoulders. I was about to just leave, forget about filling up, when I saw something else. Parked just behind the building, half hidden in the darkness, was a car. It was an old sedan covered in dust, but what got my attention were the windows. They were completely blacked out, and crudely drawn symbols were etched into the grime on the side doors. They looked like jagged stick figures and broken circles. I felt a chill run down my spine. Then, from inside the gas station, a low, guttural voice broke the silence. "Don't you want to go on your journey?" I nearly jumped out of my skin. The attendant hadn't moved, but the voice had come from him. It was a raspy, ancient sound, and it sounded like it came from a place that had never known sunlight. I quickly finished pumping, my heart pounding in my chest. As I went to pay, I fumbled with my wallet, my hands shaking. I laid the money on the counter. "Keep the change," I mumbled, not wanting to get any closer. He slowly reached for the money, his long, skeletal fingers brushing against mine. His skin felt cold and rough like old parchment. As he took the money, he looked at me, his hollow eyes meeting mine, and then he did something that will haunt me forever. He smiled, but it wasn't a human smile. His lips stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of black, jagged teeth. I backed away, stumbling on the welcome mat. I didn't say another word. I just went in my car, started the engine, and peeled out of the lot as fast as I could. I didn't look back. I just drove. But as I sped down the highway, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. It was that old black sedan. It was right behind me, and it was getting closer. The car didn't seem to be going any faster. It just moved. It was like a shadow clinging to me no matter how fast I went.
I floored the gas, my speedometer climbing, but the car behind me stayed the same distance away. I was about to lose my mind. I took a hard turn onto a small dirt road I knew led to a side route, hoping to lose it. My tires kicked up a cloud of dust, and I tore down the winding road. When I finally dared to look in my rearview mirror, the headlights were gone. The road behind me was empty, just as it had been before. I finally made it home. I was a nervous wreck, but I was safe. I told the story to my friends, and they told me to look up the gas station. I tried to find it on Google Maps. I typed in the location, the general area, even the road. Nothing came up. The gas station didn't exist. I know, now, that some places should be avoided, because sometimes the darkness on the road isn't just an absence of light. It's a presence, and it's waiting for you to stop for gas.
Thanks for watching. What whispers do you hear when the lights go out? If you have a creepy encounter you'd like to share, you can send it to mycreepyencounter@gmail.com. If you've had a moment when the world felt just a little bit wrong, leave a comment below. Until next time, stay safe and remember, you're never truly alone out there.